believe in this valley.
A man who's paralyzed from the waist down claims he was abused by the Youngstown PD.
The victim claims the incident happened 11 days ago, that he was handcuffed, beaten, and left lying in the middle of a busy road. Peggy Sinkovich spent the day investigating the allegations and has our story this evening.
11 days ago, along this stretch of Wilson Avenue on Youngstown's east side, paraplegic Willie Daniel says the truck he says he was riding in slid off the road and hit a pole, and the driver went for help. A passing tow truck driver called police, saying Daniel asked him not to call the cops. The driver also said he thought Daniel had a gun in the vehicle, but according to reports, no firearm was found. The cops arrived, and Daniel said what happened next was his worst nightmare.
As he coming towards me, I'm saying, I can't walk, I'm paralyzed. I can't walk, I'm paralyzed. I keep saying it. He like, shut the F up. I keep saying it as he coming. He slapped the handcuffs on me real tight like this. When he put the handcuffs on me, he just reached in the car and punched me in the mouth.
Daniel says Officer Robert Jolliffe then ordered him out of the car.
He opened the driver's door, snatched me out. I told him I couldn't walk. He just snatched me by my arm and dragged me up into the middle of Wilson Avenue and threw me down in front of the police car. My pants was down to my ankles, my drawers, and I was in the street in the snow in my pamper.
A few minutes later, Daniel's wife, Pam, arrived.
I seen his pants down to his ankle, and he was just laying in his pamper. So I asked the officer, why is he laying in the middle of the street and he paralyzed? So the officer gonna say, because he said he had an effing gun. So I said, a gun? I said, I know he ain't told you he had no gun, because that's why he paralyzed from a gun. He ain't told you he had no gun.
Daniel, who says he wasn't driving, is facing charges of OVI and driving under suspension.
But we want to make a complete investigation, and we're at this point, we don't want to rash the judgment or to deny or to make any allegations that may turn out in the future to be wrong.
The department declined a public records request to release the internal report. In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, 33 News.
One of the area's most high-profile attorneys is now representing Willie Daniel, the handicapped man who's accusing a Youngstown police officer with police brutality.
One day after Daniel went public with his story, David Beatrice signed on as his lawyer. Beatrice held a news conference this afternoon to discuss the case. With the story, here's Peggy Sinkovich.
As Youngstown police officials continue to investigate an allegation that a paraplegic man was assaulted by a city cop, the alleged victim has hired an attorney to represent him. Willie Daniel retained attorney David Beatrice Wednesday afternoon.
It looks preliminarily like there may have been a rush to judgment by the police officer, and so when we complete our investigation, we'll be in touch with the city's people, and we'll go from there.
Daniel, who was paralyzed from the waist down, said on February 27th he was a passenger in an SUV that went off Wilson Avenue and hit a pole. Soon after, 3 police officers arrived, and Daniel says one of the officers, Robert Jolliffe, beat him, dragged him out of the vehicle, and placed him on the road. Daniel was charged with OVI and driving under suspension, but his brother Kenneth says he was driving the vehicle, and after the crash, he left to get help.
I got out the truck. I told him to wait, stay there. I knew it was a phone booth up the street on Shea. I knew it was a phone booth there, and then I know some people stay up there, so I told him to stay there until I get back, because I didn't have his wheelchair, and I didn't want to touch him. You know what I'm saying? I was going to call his wife and the ambulance, have her call the ambulance to come.
Willie Daniel's wife arrived at the scene shortly after and questioned why her husband was laying on the ground. She says she was issued a citation for misconduct at an emergency scene. Beatrice says that ticket was never filed in court. Meanwhile, the city officials have released the 911 tape from the crash. You can hear a tow truck driver calling police saying they thought Daniel may have a gun. No gun was found. Officials with the city law department have refused to release the internal report, saying it's part of an ongoing confidential investigation. Police Chief Jimmy Hughes says he hopes the internal report will be completed soon. In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, 33 News.
We know a little more today about Robert Jolliffe. He's the Youngstown police officer accused of using excessive force on a handicapped man.
Records show that Jolliffe has been similarly accused before, that he's now off work. And we also obtained a 911 call that explains more about what happened on the night in question. With today's developments, here's Peggy Sinkovich.
Just a short time after a disabled Youngstown man says he was beaten by a city cop, a conversation took place between a 911 dispatcher and one of the officers on the call. After a second records request, we were finally able to obtain a copy of a recorded phone call between the 911 dispatcher and one of the officers at the scene. The dispatcher asked the officer about what happened that evening.
Yeah.
It's a dude to the hospital.
Yeah, what'd you guys do? Beating up handicapped people. Why are you guys beating up handicapped people?
I didn't beat nobody up. Put a hand on them. Why?
Alright.
Why? Who told you about, dude? The handicapped guy.
I know things.
Hey, he's probably will beat him up.
Yeah, he'll be alright.
Willie Daniel, who is paralyzed from the waist down, says he was beaten and dragged out of his vehicle on Wilson Avenue following a crash last month. Daniel says Officer Robert Jolliffe hit him in the face while he was handcuffed. The department is currently conducting an internal investigation. A public records request for Jolliffe's prior discipline show 12 prior internals in the past 8 years. The internals range from conduct unbecoming to an officer and excessive force. He was cleared on at least half. The outcome of some is unknown. Meanwhile, Jolliffe is now off on sick leave. Police officials say he became ill and fell during his shift Wednesday. Officials say he may be placed on a workers' compensation leave. Attempts to reach Jolliffe were unsuccessful. In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, 33 News.
Youngstown policeman Robert Jolliffe remains off the job a week after accusations surfaced that he used excessive force when dealing with a handicapped man. Today, Chief Jimmy Hughes gave his first in-depth interview in the matter. With what the chief had to say, here's Peggy Sinkovich.
Youngstown Police Chief Jimmy Hughes says while internal affairs officers continue to investigate allegations of excessive force against Officer Robert Jolliffe, he believes there is cause for concern.
There's some indication that the evidence so far there's some wrongdoing.
Jolliffe is accused of beating a handcuffed Willie Daniel, who is handicapped. Daniel says he was punched in the face by Jolliffe following a traffic crash February 27th on Wilson Avenue. Daniel was arrested on charges of OVI and driving under suspension. During an interview Monday afternoon, Hughes told me that Jolliffe's gun was taken from him last week after the officer went out on medical leave. Jolliffe collapsed at work one day after news broke that he was under investigation for the alleged assault. Police Chief Jimmy Hughes says he also wants to know more about the night that Officer Robert Jolliffe became ill. He said moments before Jolliffe collapsed, he was meeting with one of the officers that was also involved in the Willie Daniel investigation.
They didn't ask permission to meet up. There was a whole host of different set of investigated violations going on here, you know. And yes, we are concerned of what that meeting was all about and why that was necessary, you know. We believe it's in violation.
When shown Jolliffe's past internal investigations and asked if he thinks there's a problem, the chief issued this response.
Yeah, looking at this in the collectiveness of it, you know, we would say that it's a little above normal compared to the average officer.
Meanwhile, Tom Conley, director of the Youngstown Warren Urban League, says he is concerned by the allegation and will be looking into the matter. In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, 33 News.
The case of Youngstown's Willie Daniel is really two cases. One, Daniel alleges he was beat up unjustly by a city policeman. The second case accuses Daniel on the night in question of driving drunk. Today, Daniel was in court answering to the OVI charge. Peggy Sinkovich has the story.
Willie Daniels, who says he was beaten by a Youngstown police officer last month following a traffic crash, pled not guilty this morning in Youngstown Municipal Court to a misdemeanor count of operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated. City prosecutor Jay Maseko has said that reports showed Daniels' blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit the night of the accident. Daniel does admit to drinking that evening, but maintains that he was not behind the wheel. He says his brother was driving and had gone to get help after the crash. However, Police Chief Jimmy Hughes disagrees.
We believe that he had some mechanical help operating the vehicle for the gas or brake pedal. And we're going to go forth with that because we do believe at this point that he was operating the vehicle while under the influence of alcohol.
Daniel has had several driving violations over the years. and in 1998 was arrested 3 times for carrying a concealed weapon. David Beatrice, Daniel's attorney, says he's confident the truth will come out in court.
And we have witnesses who verify that Willie wasn't driving, and that's what lawsuits are about. And we have a lawsuit pending, and we'll litigate these issues in court.
Meanwhile, the chief says the internal investigation into Daniel's allegations that he was punched by Officer Robert Joliffe is continuing. Daniel says the entire situation has been difficult.
It's still a struggle for me, but I'm maintaining to get over it, as long as I stay strong.
In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, 33 News.
2 Youngstown officers face internal charges for their treatment of a handicapped man during an arrest. Peggy Sinkovich has the details.
Youngstown police officers Robert Joliffe and Jay Fletcher are facing internal charges following allegations of excessive force filed by a paraplegic man. Willie Daniel of Youngstown filed a complaint against Joliffe in February, saying the officer punched and dragged him following a traffic crash. Daniel was charged with OVI. Joliffe faces several charges, including excessive force, conduct unbecoming, and neglect of duty. Fletcher faces rules violations for not acting when he saw Joliffe dragging Daniel by the arm.
The police chief said after reviewing the investigation, it was determined that the matter would be handled internally and that no criminal charges would be filed against the officer.
Excessive force was used, and that is true. It's not something that, the criminal charges, I think it mounted to criminal charges in that respect, and I think the big factor here is the level of injury, and I believe that's the reason why we chose to exit out of the criminal charge.
Disciplinary hearings for the 2 officers are expected to take place next week. According to the internal report, a 3rd officer, Aaron Coleman, who was also at the scene, told internal affairs officers that he did witness Joliffe strike Daniel several times.
A police department where you have officers who understand that even if someone they serve with violates, it's important that they don't allow that violation to cast a pall over the entire department. So to that, we are certainly appreciative of those individuals that uphold those internal regulations.
The internal report states Joliffe denied hitting Daniel. He was given a polygraph, and the test showed he was deceptive on several questions. In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, First News on Fox.
Yesterday, Youngstown Police Chief Jimmy Hughes said he was still contemplating the fates of 2 Youngstown policemen accused of using excessive force, where apparently Hughes made up his mind shortly thereafter because today their punishment was made public. Here's Peggy Sinkovich.
2 Youngstown police officers have been fired following allegations of excessive force by a paraplegic man. Police Chief Jimmy Hughes and Mayor Jay Williams said Thursday that they both felt officers Robert Joliffe and Jay Fletcher deserved to be fired for their actions during the February arrest of Willie Daniel.
And I can tell you that any time that we receive a complaint of inappropriate actions, whether it's one of our police officers or any employee of the city of Youngstown, we take it very seriously. We conduct very thorough investigations and take decisive actions.
Daniel of Youngstown accused Joliffe of beating and dragging him out of his car during an accident investigation. Hughes says Fletcher, who was at the scene at the time, was fired because he told internal affairs investigators that he was directing traffic and did not witness Joliffe hitting Daniel.
Police officials say the officers were notified of the discipline. They now have up to 10 days to decide if they're going to appeal and possibly take the case to arbitration.
Joliffe faced several charges, including excessive force, conduct unbecoming of an officer, and neglect of duty. Fletcher faced rule violations for not acting when he saw Joliffe dragging Daniel by the arm. Hughes also tells me that he is continuing to investigate and says possible administrative charges could be filed against the 3rd officer at the scene as well as the supervisor. Meanwhile, Daniel is still facing an OVI charge. He is due back in court in August. Daniel says he's pleased the officers have been fired. In Youngstown, Peggy Sinkovich, 33 News.